what's going to keep us from winning ball games. They might not necessarily look at winning national championships as the most important thing to them. These 60-game seasons, they don't just happen. You have to live them. This isn't just about softball. This is about the experience you're going to get when you come to Texas State.
All right, welcome back to Zen Game, where we go inside the world of college sports. I'm here with Coach Ricci Woodard today at Texas State, and it was a perfect interview. To have won 844 games it's hard to do. It made me feel a little intimidated. I was like, man, there's just so many things I can ask you when you've had a career where you've gotten to win so much. It's just an incredible thing.
Well, it also just means I'm really old, to be honest. I think it's more that I've been able to do it all at the same place. That probably has me a little more reflective on it than anything else, just to think that I've been here that long. To have been able to do that and have that success, and I've been through a lot of great assistant coaches and a lot of great players to be able to get to that number, that's for sure.
What's kept you here? It's one of the things I was wondering as I was preparing for this is that, I'm sure that if this was the first time that you'd had the type of results you had last year, there would be tons of Power 4, whatever you want to call them, Power 5 schools knocking on your door, but that's been the case for all 20 plus years here. So what's kept you here? How have you been able to stay at the same place? 'Cause it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, it's a couple of things. One, I started at the University of Oregon in my college career as an assistant. So I kind of got to see that side of the business of what this sport can be. I think it was 2005, I went to interview at the University of Florida. I didn't get the job. They hired Tim Walton, who obviously has done a great job there. And when I was on that interview, I sat there thinking, do I want to do this at this magnitude, or do I want to just stay at Texas State and build something great? We had just changed the name from Southwest Texas to Texas State. I felt like things were on the rise. I felt like I could build something special here. And so, from that point on, I just was really picky and ended up not going on interviews. I've had a lot of phone calls along the way and I would say yes, and then the next day I would call and say, no, I'm going to just stay where I'm at. And so, I think there's just been a lot of things that led me to staying here. I love my quality of life. I adopted 2 little boys along the way. My parents moved here. My oldest brother's my assistant. My niece has moved to the Dallas area now. And so, I just have been able to create a home here in Texas. And so, I love the feel at Texas State.
I have to imagine leaving your team behind would be almost just impossible, given that even in this transfer portal era you're in, you've been lucky enough where players have stayed.
Yeah, again, I'm not the only one that feels like Texas State's a great place. To be able to keep a Jessica Mullins and a Sarah Vanderford in this day and age, to me was probably the highlight of what we did in the last couple of years. And that's just a loyalty, to them that they have to this place also. I like high character kids. And sometimes I think that I probably go after too nice a kid sometimes. I think a lot of people think that to be that stud, you have to also have that little chip on your shoulder a little bit. And I haven't had to have that here too much.
Sounds like there was a little bit more edge than usual, though, in the fall and the spring with kind of the process of molding a new team this year.
This is the first time I really felt like I hit the transfer portal and hit it running, and had some help along the way to get a couple of players in here from Power 5 teams, or Power 4 teams, I guess now. Yeah, whatever they are, that I think are really going to help us stay with the success we've had.
It's the best part of the portal, actually, is that when you're in a space where you lose 9 players that have been on the team for a long time, players from other places that maybe needed opportunities can sit around and look at and say, well, there's some openings, maybe I can fill one of those. So it's really kind of good for everybody involved in that sense.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, to me, it just was a perfect fit for everybody. I have some returners here that have not got to play a lot in the last 2 years, and so they're biting at the bit to get their chance to get on the field. I brought in 4 kids in the transfer portal that I think, are just hungry to get on the field every day. They all got a little taste of playing along the way, but I think they want to be on the field day in and day out. And so they've kind of provided that extra spark I think we needed that I was afraid we were going to lose after last year, just to be honest.
How did you navigate the portal? I mean, I think that was probably a new experience this year because you've been so fortunate where everyone stayed, and you had a team like last season where I think pretty much every starter was a returning player, right?
Right.
That's a pretty, you don't see that in any sport ever,
Right.
Especially in this day and age, but very rare anyway. How did you navigate the portal? How did you navigate finding the right fits for this program? So I have to imagine that was more delicate maybe than a school that relies on it more.
Well, the easy part was none of these players were new to me. They had either been players I had already tried to recruit, players I knew about. They're all Texas kids, which is the great place about, the best thing about this place is it's home. It's not very far from anywhere in the state of Texas. So it makes it a little bit easier, I think, for kids to gravitate to here. The Cape Bellas that go off to North Carolina, that's a long ways away, and kids don't realize that when they're leaving home. And these kids were still kind of that early recruiting process that we had in softball, where they were committing at eighth grade, ninth grade, and so did they really know what they were getting? Coaches changes, things like that. And so for me, it was just a matter of who wants to come to Texas State, and then I had to get in the war, and all four of these kids were really excited about Texas State, and so it was just me selling them then on, hey, we're going to build something great still with you guys here.
But were there any players that could have been all four of them that you recruited out of high school that you couldn't believe that you were going to have the opportunity to have now on this team?
Well, yeah, I mean, some of these kids I didn't go after because I was told right away, they're going to LSU, they're going to, A&M, so it was pretty simple, it was cut and dry. I think their path was already kind of set. And so I didn't really, Kate Babella is the only one that I even got on campus when she was still in high school. I think the good thing for me in the way that we go about business here is we try not to burn bridges. I think this should be a great experience, whether it's the recruiting experience or the playing experience, the college experience. To me, it's the best part of life. And so that's kind of what I try to personify when I'm recruiting also, is that this isn't just about softball, this is about the experience you're going to get when you come to Texas State.
And what would you say that experience is outside of softball and outside of the team that they're going to be? What about being here prepares them to be better for life and it's so enjoyable that no one wants to leave?
Yeah, I think, again, you get a small town feel still in a pretty decent sized community now. And people don't realize that we're 40,000 students. And sometimes I hesitate to say that in my recruiting spiel because I don't think parents realize that we're that big. And so I think you still get the full experience, but it just has a different feel to it. The community itself is pretty bonded. It still is a place you can go hang out at the river and just enjoy the day if you have time. I just think there's a lot of different things. You can go 30 minutes one direction into a big city and 45 to the other direction. You can go the hill country. I just think that kids, you're not going to find a better place to be you than you are at Texas State.
So what were the biggest lessons you think from Oregon? Talked about you were there not that long, it was a while ago, but what do you think like some of the foundational things you learned up there that helped you then go build the program down here?
Yeah, I think, when you're somebody's assistant, you learn how you want to do things, and you learn how you don't want to do things both. And I think that's what I got the most out of that. There was a lot of great things that I learned along the way. I've had a lot of great mentors and coaches that have helped me, learn the game and the knowledge that I have. But it was a dog-eat-dog world, and I was like, I just don't think it has to be done that way. When we're recruiting people, and people in Southern California are sending them, the weather here in Oregon and the weather, in Southern California this week, and so every day it was just, I just felt like it was a business, if that makes sense.
Even back then?
Yes, even back then, and I haven't really ever felt that way here.
I think that, and you also got to experience, the best facilities. Oregon just traditionally has been blessed with some of the best facilities in the country of any school in every sport, thanks to having this great company, Nike, right in the backyard.
Yeah, he used to land his helicopter right in front of my window. So yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, what he's done for that school is tremendous, and he's helped a lot of students and kids out. But was there also an understanding of being in that environment, of knowing that's not really what matters in these kids' development at the end of the day?
Yeah, especially with the female athlete, I think. I think maybe with the male athlete it may be a little different. I'm not sure. I can't speak on that 100%, but I do know for females, maybe outside of the 1 or 2%, it's about the experience. Even dealing with my brother as my assistant now, he was at the University of Arizona State and at Auburn both, and he was always shocked when kids didn't pick them and would pick somewhere else over them. I'm like, you don't understand. Girls just think differently than guys. They might not necessarily look at winning national championships as the most important thing to them. And that was something that I kind of had to live with along the way for myself, is that I may not ever be able to win a national championship here, but there's a lot of different things that I can do here that are considered successful.
I feel like there has been some validation, though, over the past few seasons that you could, in terms of the possibility, you could go to a World Series and win one. In the sense that you've had games, I think that probably gives you a lot of extra life in this job of seeing your team go and beat Texas and Alabama over a weekend, and seeing, I think that the girls, they have to feel when you go play Texas that the degree of separation, it's a surmountable task to win that game, and then you go see them play in the championship. So it's impossible for it to feel impossible to win one when you see Texas so close to doing it and you guys so close to them.
Right. I think it's just, it's always a carrot. It's always right there dangling. This year I think when we go to A&M for that regional, I think if we win that 1-0 ball game, to put us into Sunday as the team that has to get beat twice, I think there's a good chance of it. But everything has to fall our way just perfectly for it to work out, that's for sure.
And you've been to a super regional, and once you get to one of those games, it's like, it's a best of 3 series, and really,
I felt like if we could have won that regional last year, we had a pretty good shot.
It's crazy. Right. That's the craziest thing, though, is like winning 2 games against anybody over a 3-game series. You guys do that so many times a year, and just can go. They can pretty much, unless like there's an absolute complete mismatch on any given weekend in any location, winning 2 games is.
Right, especially if you have a Jessica Mullins in the mound.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah,
she was a helpful piece. But I think that it does feel like there's kind of a renewed energy this year in terms of other people at least getting to know that they can pitch. Because it's hard as a coach to take someone like that out of the circle when you got an All-American that very few people can hit.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think some of those kids that have been here with us under her didn't get the opportunity that they would have had to throw a lot of innings at other places. You're exactly right. So
but they got the example too. So it's kind of a win-win, because sometimes when you see what it's like for a person to perform at that level and you sit behind them, then you have that mental expectation of, oh, I saw her do that for however long I was looking to do it. I'm going to get to, and that's one of the reasons you got a pitcher. I think it's pretty sensational. You have a pitcher who's named conference preseason pitcher of the year without she barely ever threw relative to probably most of her peers in the conference.
Right. No, you're right. I mean, to me, that speaks volumes of what people think she's going to be capable of, and that was as a freshman. So some days when I watch her out there this spring already, I'm like, okay, she's got it. And other days I'm like, okay, this may take some experience to really be that person. But she's fun to watch. When she's on fire, she's fun to watch.
When you have someone like that, it just foundationally sets up so well for a team, because it has one half the game pretty much taken care of, so it lets you fill all the other gaps in.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, what role she's ready to take on, and how many, runs a game we're going to need to score to support that. But I still feel like I'm in a way better spot than I thought it was going to be last May when I graduated all those kids. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it had to be it had to be so bittersweet, because I think there's the part that's like, well, I get to now start a new journey. I think there's always that little excitement for anybody when it's like, all right, new beginning. But so many of those girls have been there for so long and been playing for so long. Right. And that had been the identity of the program. And I think it had to be I just can't imagine how difficult it was for everybody after that A&M experience, because I just feel like that there was aspirations. Expectations isn't the word I want to use, because my goodness, that team achieved a lot. But I think there were aspirations for everybody in that locker room to do more, and for that to end that way, it was just, I have to imagine, heartbreaking for so many.
Yeah, it was. It was tough. I mean, after that 1-0 loss, I was shocked we could turn around and beat Penn State again. I'm not going to lie, because you could just tell the air was let out a little bit after that. And so, we just had to regather and say, hey, let's just make sure we're playing tomorrow, and then to try to beat somebody for the 5th time of a season that's as good a team as Penn State was. I couldn't be more proud of that group and what they did do, because you're exactly right. They expected to win that game they lost 1-0.
I listened to an interview with you. I was preparing for this one, and I'd never heard a coach before say, I have to do nothing for team chemistry. We were just ready to go. I felt like it would be almost a disservice to have any set events, anything, that the girls were all there. And I got that sense talking to them. It was everyone was just best friends. There was no need to do anything. How'd you navigate this offseason where now all of a sudden you have all these new faces?
Honestly, I mean, my freshmen, I had 8 of them to start with. We're down to 7. But they kind of know each other really well, but I'm not sure they know anybody else really well. My transfers have kind of clicked together a little bit. it's been an interesting navigation. I will say, I think finally in the last 2 weeks we might be getting a little bit headed in the right direction. We're all getting on the same page, but it's taken some come to Jesus meetings.
I can imagine. I think that is there kind of like a competition in some of these like internal games between some of the new people and some of the old people because everyone's kind of competing for their spot?
Yes. Yeah, it's been a rough thing to navigate because again, I've had, a couple of kids that sat the bench here for 2 years and really thought that they were going to get their time, but in the transfer portal world, I wouldn't get comfortable sitting the bench for anybody anymore because you better keep getting better because our job as coaches is to bring in the next best player that we can bring in. So I do think that it started out that way for sure, which probably didn't help with the team chemistry. But I think as females, we tend to gravitate towards that team chemistry and that bonding. I did a little exercise that I've done a few times where I put a board together, and this side's culture and this side's the physical aspects, and I gave them some little sticky notes, and I said, okay, what's going to keep us from winning ball games? And everything but one thing was on the cultural side. And to me, that's the epitome of how girls think right there. And as coaches, we'd have been like, we're not going to be able to score enough runs, we're not going to keep the ball in the yard, we're going to make errors. And all of theirs was about how they're going to handle the locker room issues.
And, games help too. I think
Yes.
sometimes you have to see the results and see maybe, hey, like you need the diversity sometimes. You need to have a loss where you realize, like, if I had supported that teammate a little better, it might have been good if I had been better energy because sports is emotional. That's not really a male or a female thing. I think that actually one of the better things about female sports, the female athletes actually might feel more secure in letting their emotions out. I think that there are a lot of male athletes that if they had a better space to let their emotions out after some troubling things, in my experience talking to them, it might have actually helped them because it's tough. You end up in a situation where you have worked your whole life for something, and a lot of kids in all D1 college sports were the best player by a mile. I think one of my favorite stories, a guy in your conference, Chandler Fields comes into Louisiana, and he'd been the starting quarterback on his team every level of life from like 8th grade on. And so he's like, I'm just going to start. Like, even though they have an established starter, he thought like, I'm going to be the best quarterback. He said it took him 3 days to realize, oh yeah, I'm not going to play. But like, I think that for a lot of kids, that's a very emotionally challenging thing. And there's no doubt that this opener against Arkansas, there are going to be some girls on the team that are facing the reality in that first day, not to say things won't change, but hey, I didn't win the starting job at this position. I'm watching somebody else. And in some cases, you see it every year, there's someone who has to have the realization of, oh, this player in front of me is really good. And they are not going to exit the field bearing an injury, which no one wants to see. This player is not exiting. So that is emotional for those first few games, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think sometimes with girls, it's almost the opposite. Like they come in thinking, well, I'm not going to have to play as a freshman. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, no, you're going to have to play as a freshman. Like, think about that completely opposite. Like, what if you are the starter? Are you going about this the way that you want to go about it if you are going to be the starter? And so it's such a different theory sometimes with the way the female athlete thinks versus the male. Because I think we have to convince them sometimes that, no, you're good enough to be the starter. The question is, are you preparing like you're going to be the starter? And so I kind of had to face that more with this freshman group because I think they're really talented. I think they just had a misconception of that they were going to get to come in and get ready. And I'm like, no, you're going to get ready now. Like, it's time to go.
Who's been the most surprising of any player this year?
I would probably have to go still again with Maddie Azua when she's on because I just wasn't sure.
Even though the conference, whoever was voting on preseason conference, they were sure, but it's something different internally.
Yes, because I know the Maddie Azua of day in and day out, and she personifies that I'm it and give me the ball, but at the end of the day, I wasn't sure she's ready for that spot, but I'm starting to feel like she's ready for that spot.
Some people are just better in games too. Like,
You're right.
It's funny in sports. Like there are certain players that I understand why they're not playing, even though like as a fan, sometimes you could see like, oh, why is this guy not starting? And then the fan's actually right. Like there are times where the fan's like, why is this guy playing? And then they come in the game and they're great. But the problem is as a coach, they're not good. There's a lot of players that aren't good in practice for whatever reason. And then all of a sudden you put them into game situations and they're They figured out.
Kristen Zaleski, who's the assistant at UT, was that way. I mean, you put her off a tee and she looked terrible on the swing, and she'd be the first to tell you, why can't I hit off a tee? But that's her first All-American here, and she was lights out good. So, but at practice, she just wasn't as good. I don't know what the difference was, but yeah, you put her in a game, and it was like, oh yeah, this is her.
Some people, a crowd, whatever it is, maybe it's their team. I don't know. Like, lights go on, and all of a sudden, you got someone that's totally different.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes they also don't feel like they have to compete at practice because there's nobody really that's as good as them at practice. So it's kind of a, and then all of a sudden you get to get in the box against somebody else, and the competitive side comes out a little bit more. That's how I always felt about her. Is I'm not sure that we matched her athletic ability here real well. So she was already good enough. And so I think it took game day to make that come out. And that's kind of what I'm hoping Maddie Azu is going to be about now. She knew we had Jessica Mullins last year, so she could be a little bit, I don't have to carry the load, where I think this year she feels a little bit more the pressure to carry the load, and I think that competitive side of hers is going to dominate.
Question I was really curious about coming today, which is so relevant right now. It's like you've done this for so long and had success for so long. What is it with a freshman? I mean, it could be someone in the portal too, where you have that instinct of this person's going to help my program. Like, I mean, Sierra described it that you basically knew her trajectory before she did. How do you do that?
Again, probably experience. I mean, you start to think about this kid reminds me of this kid reminds me of this one. And I'm an all-in person. I'm like, if you're all in, I'm all in. Sierra Trahan's an all-in, and you could tell that by watching her play. I love kids that have passion for the game, and you can't fake that. Sierra Trahan, Carmen Bass, both of those were kids that you could just tell by watching them. Jessica Mullins, Sarah Vanderford, those kids you can tell just love the game. You're going to see that with quite a few of these players, and that's what's been fun about this team.
Yeah, Carmen's a person I can tell that probably has never taken a play off in her life, even on the bench as a DP, probably never is at a play where they're out of the game for 1 second.
Yeah, she's a kid that loves to hit. We've had to get her on that on the catching side of it. I'm like, hey, we need you to catch. So I think she's had to buy into that a little bit more because she loves to hit. And you can just tell she's a hitter.
At the beginning, you had so much success in your first year.
I knew I had two really good pitchers that year, and so I don't know, maybe it was just the young, dumb me that just thought that we had a chance to be really, really good, and we did. We ended up playing in a regional final to go to the World Series that year. So just that we were facing Jenny Finch at Arizona, and the odds were not in our favor. Again, we got to that Sunday game, but that was a fun group. I also, again, was young and dumb enough to think I could just come in and dominate the Southland, and probably did for a few years, but the Sun Belt's been a whole nother issue.
Did young and dumb help you though? In terms of in some ways, that era of coaching because you believed you could do it?
Yeah, no doubt, because that team thought they could too, which is crazy to me when I think back to it, because talent-wise, that was not one of my best talented teams by a long ways, but they had all the pieces to the puzzle, and I was their third coach in 3 years, and so they were ready to just play also.
What could this team learn from that team?
Not to worry about the hype, not to get caught up on the who's supposed to win, who's not supposed to win, who's supposed to do this. I'm not going to lie, they even shocked me. When we started beating people like Oregon and Oregon State, and I was like, and had a chance to beat UCLA on our own field, I was shocked. I'm not going to lie, early on I was like, holy cow, this isn't what I really was expecting from this group, but they believed, and their team chemistry was probably better than any team I've ever had. They did everything together, which could have been a good or a bad thing. We went through some trials of having to do things correctly, even though you're doing them together. We're still going to do them the right way. But they were a fun group. Those seniors had been through a lot, just in different coaching styles. I feel like I was probably kind of the middleman of their coaching styles that they had dealt with, so that helped. But I also just came in and told them, hey, you're really good. If we ever learn to hit, we're going to be really good. And that's exactly what happened. And the next chance we got, the 2003 group was probably just as good, and it was Cat Osterman right up the road on Sunday. So again, the odds weren't in our favors to win any of those, but those were some really fun days where you had 8 teams at a regional, and if you won it, you got to go to the World Series. And so it was just had a different vibe to it also. Well,
it's got to be an aspiration at some point to host a regional here, because the facility's so nice. It's like it's made to have that happen.
I really was hoping this past year we would get that bid. And even looking back in hindsight, I still think we had a real shot to get that. And I think that changes things. I think that could have helped change the outcome of that regional if we're the host.
Oh, I mean, like, there's no doubt. You have your home. I don't need to be breaking ground in this conversation to say that when you have home crowd in any sport, it helps.
Right. And the conference tournament was obvious to that because, we're playing the Raging Cajuns, and the place is packed, but it's packed with more Texas State fans than it was Raging Cajun fans.
A softball preseason tournament's so interesting because every team's got a totally different vibe coming into the weekend. In some cases, it's fun to see. Some teams are just happy to be there. Like, they're just like, hey, we're traveling down from the Northeast. We know we're probably going to lose, but this is like one of the most fun things we're going to do all year, where other teams like you guys know that every single one of these games is going to be judged for the tournament. And there's no guarantee in the conference tournament, so you want to get net large bid. So every one of these games is important.
It's hard to make freshmen understand that. That is probably the biggest thing that, in hindsight, I wish I'd have done different along the way, is that, their preseason high school stuff doesn't matter. They don't even think they're real games. And I'm like, no, those were real games. It just maybe didn't matter for your district seeding to get you to state. But every single one of our games matter, starting with the very first one.
You think about last year, and everyone who was on the team last year has the perspective. Any one or two games that were won, that were lost at any point in the season could have been the difference in hosting a regional. It was that close. So when you've experienced that, you kind of know that all these matter.
Again, I think that's the hardest part about having a young team, is making them understand that every pitch, every inning, every game matters. And with this team, I think we're just trying to approach it as we got to be playing our best ball in May. And so it may come down to a conference tournament for us. But somehow we've got to make them understand that through the growing process, the wins and losses matter.
But it might be more like that first team, where it's like the best bet here is just to have blind hope that, that they're gonna make it and they're gonna be good, because you can't really, when you don't have the experience, the only thing that can sometimes help is naivety.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And I think they're as talented as a lot of teams I've ever put on the field, just athletic talent. So it's just going to be a matter of how much that experience and be able to handle the adversity of the game is going to play out.
One of the few last things. First one being, I just want to have curiosity. I have a sibling, and maybe it's possible me and her will work together someday. And I was thinking about that coming into here. What have you learned to be able to have success? You guys have had a lot of success together. How you and your brother working together? What have been some of the tips that you have that allow you guys to do that well?
Man, I don't know if I have any tips, but communication is probably part of the key. I know he's always going to have my back. He knows at the end of the day I'm always going to have his back, but he also knows we're going to do it my way. I don't know if he learned that, early enough, but through that first year, he figured that out. And I think the biggest thing for him to understand that he is already retired and, gets to do this for fun, kind of, although you wouldn't know he's doing it for fun most of the time. And what I tried to tell him is I'm still feeding my kids with this job. And so, there's still a certain way we're going to go about this. And I'm always going to err as, I don't know if you'd call me a player's coach, but again, I think this should be a fun experience. And if it's not fun, you shouldn't do it. And so, he's about winning because he's been to the World Series. He's got that taste. So we're probably a good mixture for each other. I think he's helped elevate, me back to, what if, what we can do. And I think I've tried to mellow him a little bit to, hey, remember why we do this, why we got into this profession. It wasn't about wins and losses. So, we've had to kind of just remember and remind each other, from day to day, what we're trying to accomplish together. It's been fun, though. It's been more fun than I thought it would be, even, to be honest.
Is it actually, you think, in some cases he's just doing it to do it now? And I think that one thing I saw somewhere he mentioned that, getting to be in Austin and have a family here in this broader area was a really big draw, and to be able to do this with you. But now, is that actually kind of like giving you a new, I don't think you need it, but I'm trying to think of the right way to say it, but extra added energy in some ways, because having him there kind of makes it a new chapter?
Yeah, actually, what it added was somebody with a whole lot of coaching experience, and knowledge. And so I was able to step back from the parts of the game that he handles for me. And so it's been nice. My whole staff in general, I've been able to kind of step back and just kind of be the manager. I still handle the hitting, I don't know if someday I might hand that over to somebody too, but he completely took over the defensive side. My pitching coach kind of grew up with me, and so I've handled he's kind of got all of that. Coach Brunda's back with me, and she does a great job of kind of managing the squad, if that makes sense, kind of the behind scenes things. And so it's just been, in general, it's been a fun coaching group to be with.
Probably extended both of your careers because he's in a place where he just gets to have fun. And when you're doing that, you can, I think that's good for longevity in general.
Yeah, definitely. Especially, early in my career, I was having one assistant straight out of college, and neither one of us had a lot of experience. And so to go from that to where I'm at now, people are always like, "Why are you still here?" And Texas State, I feel like has done a good job of taking care of me along the way to help me build what I've been able to build. Obviously we all think there's more they can do, but I think they've. If you look at the facility I get to go to work at every day, I had one university call me 3 different times. In 3 different job openings they had. And I said, I don't think you understand where I get to go to work every day, And so it's just been, I think it's been a great fit for both of us, but to be able to do what I've done staff-wise at this point in my career is probably what makes it easier. You're exactly right, because some of the loads of responsibility is taken off of me from the day-to-day chores.
I don't want to ask you in closing about your expectations for the season. I think that would be a dumb question. It's easier to ask athletes that, but because they're always going to reach for the stars. I think that's good. But what do you think it takes for this team to be the best version of themselves this season?
I think it's going to be experience. I think it's going to be that we handle the adversity and the grind. That's probably my biggest question mark on this group, because they don't know what it is, and the grind is real. And until you experience it, these 60-game seasons, they don't just happen. You have to live them, and you have to embrace the challenge of it. And that's what I'm kind of excited to see, if we've prepared this team to be able to do that, or if it's going to be a constant battle to get them to embrace that challenge.
I'm excited to watch. It's been awesome having you on this show, and
thanks for having me.
Pumped for the season.